Colorado, 1882. He said it on a Tuesday afternoon in July, leaning against a fence post by the creek, watching her wring out a shirt with the kind of easy competence that made everything look simple. He hadn't planned it. He hadn't rehearsed it. It came out the way true things sometimes do, before better judgment could stop them. You know, Emily, whoever ends up marrying you is going to be a very lucky man. He expected a laugh, a modest deflection, the kind of response that lets everyone move on without anyone having to be brave. Instead, she went still. The color came into her face slowly, like a lamp being turned up. She didn't look at him immediately. Then she did, and her expression was something he had never seen on her before, open, afraid, and decided, all at once. And she said, very quietly, "I was hoping it would be you." Nathan Cole was 28 years old, running a modest cattle ranch on the western edge of Clearwater, Colorado. Everyone called him Nathan. Only his mother had ever used his full name, William Nathan, and she'd been gone 6 years. He wasn't a complicated man. He worked hard, kept his word, paid his debts, and went to bed tired every night with the satisfaction of someone who has done what needed doing. What he didn't have, what he had quietly stopped expecting, was someone to come home to. His neighbors to the east were the Bennett family, Robert, his wife Sarah, and their daughter Emily. The Bennetts were good people, the kind who showed up when someone needed a hand and never mentioned it afterward. Emily Bennett was 24. She woke before sunrise, kept the house, tended the garden, helped with the washing, cooked 3 meals a day, and still found time to bring soup to old Mr. Coleman down the road when his back went out. She did all of this without complaint and without fanfare, the way some people breathe naturally without thinking about it. Nathan had known her for years. He had spoken to her dozens of times. He had eaten at her family's table. He had watched her work and thought vaguely that Robert Bennett had raised a fine daughter. He had not, until that particular summer, understood what he was actually looking at. The fence between his property and the Bennetts ran along a shallow creek lined with cottonwood trees. Spring floods had taken out 2 sections, and on a Tuesday in July, he was out there repairing them when Emily came down to wash. She didn't see him at first. She set her basket at the water's edge and began working with the easy efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow, her hair pinned loosely with a few strands escaping at the neck. She was humming something low, barely audible over the water. He kept working on the fence post. He wasn't watching her, except that he was. Not in any way that would have embarrassed either of them, just the way your eyes go to movement, to life, when the landscape around you is still. She worked quickly, occasionally pausing to look at the mountains with a small, private expression he couldn't quite read. After a while, she noticed him. "Morning, Nathan." "Morning, Emily." He nodded at the fence. "Spring floods. They always get that section," she said. "Papa's been meaning to raise our posts, too." They talked for a few minutes about nothing particular, the weather, the cattle, whether Coleman's back had improved. Then she went back to her washing, and he went back to his fence, and the creek moved between them, and the cottonwoods made their soft sound in the wind. And Nathan Cole drove a post into the ground and thought, for the first time in a long time, that he was not entirely alone. The town of Clearwater held a summer social on the last Saturday of July. It was the kind of event that mattered enormously in small towns, a chance to see everyone, be seen, dance badly to good music, and conduct the social business the rest of the year was too busy for. Old Whitfield on the fiddle, enough food to feed twice the county, and the particular energy of people who don't see each other enough. Nathan arrived to find the Bennett family already there. Robert in his good jacket, Sarah with her hair properly done, and Emily in a pale blue dress that was simple and clean and somehow exactly right. She was helping set up the dessert table, talking and laughing, completely at ease. 3 men asked her to dance before the music had been playing 20 minutes. Nathan watched this from across the room with an expression he would have described as neutral. He danced once with the widow Palmer, who was a good dancer and a sensible woman, and who told him directly that he'd been staring at Emily Bennett all evening. "I haven't been staring," he said. "Nathan," she said patiently. "I've known you since you were 11. You've been staring." He changed the subject, but later, walking home under the stars, he thought about it honestly. Emily Bennett, his neighbor, kind and capable, and he stopped walking. She was someone he wanted to see every day. He hadn't known that until this exact moment. But now that he knew it, it seemed obvious, the kind of thing that had been true for a long time before he had the sense to look at it directly. He stood on the road in the dark for a while, listening to the crickets, feeling like a man who has just found something he didn't know he'd lost. Something had shifted quietly in the particular direction of Emily Bennett. Old Mr. Coleman's back got worse in August, and Emily went to his place every other day with food. Nathan found this out when he saw her going past on the road, basket in hand. He didn't think about it, he just climbed down from the barn roof he'd been repairing and offered to walk with her. She looked at him with a slightly surprised expression she smoothed over quickly. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," he said. "I want to." They walked the half-mile in the warm morning sun, and Nathan discovered something he should have known already. Emily Bennett was extraordinarily good company. She had opinions, quiet, considered opinions offered without forcing them on anyone. She noticed things, the soft bank developing at the Second Creek crossing, the Henderson corn coming in short, what that would mean for the county come harvest. She was funny in a dry, unhurried way that snuck up on you. They sat with old Coleman for an hour while Emily heated the soup and checked his fire. Coleman was a man of strong opinions and limited social graces, and he told Nathan directly, in front of Emily, that he was a fool if he didn't see what was right in front of him. Emily went bright red and found something urgent to do in the kitchen. Nathan looked at the old man. "I'm working on it," he said quietly. Coleman made a sound that was probably approval. On the walk back, neither of them mentioned what Coleman had said, but the silence was the warm kind, full rather than empty. And when they reached the fork where their paths divided, Emily turned to him with a small, genuine smile. "Thank you for the company," she said. "It's nicer with someone to walk with." He watched her go toward the Bennett property and thought, yes, it is. It was a Tuesday again. Nathan had begun to think Tuesdays were significant. He was checking the repaired fence sections when he heard her at the creek. This time she had a larger load and was also, he noticed, singing, not performing, just singing low and easy to herself, the way birds do, without awareness of an audience. He stood there a moment longer than he should have. The blue sky, the cottonwoods, the sound of water, and Emily Bennett doing ordinary things with a grace she didn't seem to know she had. She noticed him and raised a hand. He walked to the fence. They talked about the weather, the cattle, the Henderson corn. Then a comfortable pause, the kind between people who don't need to fill silence. He was watching her wring out a shirt, her arms strong, her movements precise, completely unself-conscious, and he was thinking about what Coleman had said and what Widow Palmer had said and what he himself had admitted on the road in July. And then, without planning it, without rehearsing it, before his better judgment could stop it. "You know, Emily, whoever ends up marrying you is going to be a very lucky man." He meant it as an honest observation. He expected her to laugh it off. Instead, she went still. Her hand stayed on the shirt. A small color came into her face, not dramatic, just a deepening, like a lamp being turned up. She didn't look at him immediately. Then she did. Her expression was something he had never seen on her before, open and afraid and decided all at once, and she said, very quietly, "I was hoping it would be you." The creek kept moving. The cottonwoods kept making their sound. A hawk crossed the sky above them, unhurried. Nathan stood on his side of the fence and understood that something had just changed between them that could not be changed back. He was not sure he wanted it changed back. "Emily," he said, and then, because he was a man who said what he meant, "I meant what I said." She was still looking at him steadily. "I know you did," she said. "That's why I said what I said. I've been thinking about you since July." "The social," she said. "Before that, probably. I just didn't know it yet." She looked at the shirt in her hands, then set it carefully back in the basket. "I've been thinking about you for considerably longer than July." There was a dry note in her voice, that humor of hers showing up even here. "You were somewhat slower than I was." He laughed. He hadn't expected to laugh. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't apologize," she said. "You got there." They stood on opposite sides of the fence in the summer sun, and Nathan thought about how strange it was, how a person could be right there, close enough to speak to every week, and how long it could take to actually see them. He felt something he recognized, after a moment, as gratitude. "Would you let me come call on you properly?" he said. "I'd like to speak with your father." She looked at him for a moment, then picked up her basket. "He likes you," she said simply. "He's been hoping you'd get around to it for about a year." She walked toward the Bennett house, and Nathan stood at the fence for a long time after she was gone, feeling like a man who had narrowly avoided the worst mistake of his life. He went the next evening, good shirt, combed hair, more nervous than he'd been since he was 16 and had to tell his father he'd lost 2 cattle in a storm. Robert Bennett was on the porch when he arrived, which told Nathan that Emily had mentioned something. Bennett was a large, quiet man with a gray beard and eyes that saw things without commenting on them immediately. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. They sat looking at the last of the sunset over the western hills. "I'd like to come calling on Emily," Nathan said, "with your permission." Bennett was quiet for a moment. "Then what took you so long?" Nathan looked at him. "I'm asking sincerely," Bennett said. "Sarah and I have been watching you figure this out for 2 years. We were beginning to wonder if we needed to say something directly." "I'm slow," Nathan said. "You're steady," Bennett said, which was a kinder version of the same thing. He looked at the hills. "Emily doesn't ask for things she doesn't need, but she deserves a man who sees her clearly, who sees what she actually is." "I see her," Nathan said quietly. Bennett looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Supper's at 6 most evenings," he said. "Sarah sets a good table." Nathan had supper with the Bennetts 4 times that week. On the 4th evening, he and Emily walked to the edge of the property and stood in the last daylight and talked about the ranch, about the future, about small things and large ones. "Are you happy here?" he asked. "With this life?" She considered it genuinely. "I think happiness is mostly made, not found. People who go looking for it somewhere else usually miss what they already have." She looked at him. "What about you?" "I think," he said carefully, "that I'm getting a lot happier." October arrived cold and clear and golden. The courtship moved at the pace of 2 people who were also running properties, which meant it happened in the spaces between work, supper evenings, Sunday afternoons, walks to the creek and back. He brought her wildflowers from the north pasture, not bought, just ones he noticed and thought she would like. She pressed them without making a production of it. She taught him to make apple pie. He was not good at it. She was patient. He got better. She told him patience was not her natural gift, but that he made it easy, the kind of thing she said sideways, without looking at him, that he found himself thinking about for days afterward. He fixed the sticking gate on the Bennett property without mentioning it. Robert mentioned it 2 weeks later with a handshake that said more than the words. And then one night in mid-October, something happened that he never told her about. He was walking across the field toward the Bennett house for supper, and he stopped, not because anything was wrong, because something was right, and that frightened him in a way that nothing wrong ever quite could. He stood in the dark field with the lights of the Bennett house ahead of him and understood fully what he was walking toward. Not just supper, not just Emily, but the wanting itself, the real kind, the kind that could be lost. He had stopped wanting things directly a long time ago, because wanting directly meant the possibility of losing directly, and he had lost enough to know what that cost. He stood there for 10 minutes. Then he walked forward anyway. Emily didn't know he'd stopped. She opened the door before he knocked, she always heard him coming across the field, and said, "You're late. The biscuits are getting cold." And he stepped inside, into the warmth and the smell of supper, and looked at her and thought, this is what I almost didn't let myself have. That night at the table, she said something that he had been turning over in his mind for weeks, that she found it easier to talk to him than to anyone she'd known for years. "Why do you think that is?" he asked. She considered it. "I think you actually listen. Most people are waiting for their turn to speak." He looked at her across the table. "I'm learning that from you," he said. She smiled, that small direct smile. "Good. You're a fast learner when you try." He asked her in November, at the fence by the creek. He had thought about a more elaborate setting, the ridge above the valley, the sunset behind him, but when the moment came, it didn't feel right to dress it up. The creek was where they had first said the true things. It seemed right to come back. The cottonwoods had gone gold and were beginning to let go of their leaves. The air had the first real cold of autumn. Emily had a shawl around her shoulders. He had the ring in his pocket, his mother's, a simple silver band with a small stone. He had been carrying it for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment, and had finally decided that the right moment was the one you made yourself. "Emily," he said. She turned. He stood in front of her and said what he meant plainly, the way he'd learned she preferred. "I know I was slow," he said. "I know it took me longer than it should have to see what was right in front of me. But I see it now. I see you clearly, every day. And I want to keep seeing you every day for the rest of my life. I want to build something with you, a home, a family, a life we make together." He paused. "I would very much like it if you would marry me." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were bright. She was smiling, the kind of smile that is so genuine it has nowhere to hide. "Nathan Cole," she said. "It took you long enough. Is that a yes?" "That is absolutely a yes," she said. He put his mother's ring on her finger there by the creek, under the gold cottonwoods. She looked at it for a moment, just a moment, with an expression that was not about the ring, but about the life it stood for. Then she looked up at him, and he kissed her for the first time, and the creek moved past them the way it always had, indifferent and faithful, and the cottonwoods let go of another leaf or two into the November air. That winter was the best of Nathan's life so far. Not because it was easy, winters on the Colorado Plateau never were. There were cattle to manage, fences to check, wood to cut and stack. But now there was supper at the Bennetts twice a week, and walks home in the cold with Emily beside him, and the knowledge, solid and warm as a good fire, that spring was coming. He built things that winter, repaired the kitchen properly, replaced the floor in the main room, put in a second window facing east so the morning light would come through. He didn't tell Emily. He just did it, because the house was hers too now, even if she didn't know it yet. When Sarah Bennett heard the news of the engagement, she cried, the good kind of crying, overwhelmed relief, and held Emily's hands and looked at the ring and then at Nathan and said, "I always knew it would be you." Robert nodded from across the room in a way that confirmed he had known it, too. Coleman, told the next morning, looked at Nathan for a long moment and said, "Huh. Finally." Which was the same word 4 other people used that week, making Nathan suspect his feelings had been considerably more visible than he believed. In February, Emily came to look at the ranch house with her mother, to plan where things would go. She stood in the kitchen and saw the new window and the morning light coming through it, and was quiet for a moment. "You did this without telling me," she said. "I did." "Why the east window?" "So you'd have good light in the mornings," he said. She was quiet for another moment. Then she walked across the kitchen and took his hand and held it the way you hold something you intend to keep. "Thank you," she said. 3 words, no performance. He understood that she was not thanking him for the window. She was thanking him for what the window meant, that he had thought of her in the dark of winter before she was there, and made something ready for her arrival. That is what love looks like when it doesn't announce itself. It just quietly faces east. The wedding was on a Saturday in April, when the cottonwoods were coming into leaf and the hills were green and the sky was the bright blue that follows a week of spring rain. Half of Clearwater came. Emily wore a dress her mother had made, ivory cotton with small embroidered details at the collar, not elaborate, not trying to be anything other than what it was. She walked to him with her father on one arm and her face clear and certain, and Nathan thought, "I cannot believe I was slow about this." They said their vows in front of Reverend Adams, who kept it short because everyone agreed he was better at weddings when he did. Robert Bennett's voice cracked slightly when asked who gave this woman, which caused a sympathetic ripple through several rows, and at least 2 of the men. Nathan said his vows looking directly at Emily. They were for her, not for the room. She said hers the same way. Then they were married. Old Whitfield played the fiddle. Everyone ate and danced on the grass until the sun went down. That night, in the ranch house with the east window and the new floor, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her hair down and her hands wrapped around a cup of tea and looked at Nathan across the table with an expression that was entirely new, something settled and permanent. And said, "We're going to be very happy here, you know." "I know," he said. "I think I've known for a while." "Slower than I was," she said. "But I got there," he said. She smiled. "You got there." The years that followed were built from ordinary days and honest work, and the particular richness of 2 people who choose each other and keep choosing each other. The ranch grew steadily, a new barn the 2nd year, better grazing the 3rd. Emily ran the accounts, because she was better with numbers than Nathan, and they both knew it. She also organized a lending system among the women of Clearwater for tools and supplies during hard seasons, a practical idea she had without much awareness that it was also a small act of community leadership that people would talk about for years. Their first child was born in the spring of the 3rd year, a boy they named Robert, for her father, who arrived with strong lungs and an opinion about everything. Emily said he'd inherited that from Nathan. Nathan said he'd inherited it from Emily. The truth was probably both. Their daughter came 2 years later, Eleanor, for Nathan's mother. She had Emily's eyes and Nathan's stubbornness, a combination that would serve her well for the rest of her life. On a Tuesday evening in the autumn of their 5th year, Nathan was at the fence by the creek, the same fence, repaired again after another spring flood, as it always needed to be, when Emily came down with both children, Robert running ahead, Eleanor toddling behind with great determination and limited speed. Emily saw him and raised a hand. He climbed the fence and went to them. Robert immediately demanded to be put on his shoulders. Eleanor, with the absolute severity of a 2-year-old, demanded the same. A negotiation was required. Later, when the children had tired themselves out and were leaning against them in the last of the afternoon light, Emily rested her head against his shoulder and said, "You know what? I've been thinking about that first summer, the creek, what you said. Whoever marries you will be lucky." "You were right," he said. "She is very lucky." He looked at her. "I'm the lucky one." "We're both lucky," she said practically. "We're both lucky," he agreed. The cottonwoods had gone gold again, October, reliable as everything else on this land that had become theirs. The mountains held the last of the sun on their high peaks. Clearwater County kept on being Clearwater County, beautiful and indifferent, full of people trying to build lives worth building. And Nathan Cole held his family in the golden afternoon light and understood, with the full weight of a man who knows what things cost, what he had almost missed, and was grateful down to the bone that he had gotten there, slower than he should have been, but there, exactly where he was supposed to be. Nathan wasn't a coward. He was just a man who had gotten so used to not wanting things directly that he stopped noticing when he'd started wanting them again. That's not a weakness unique to him. It's something most of us recognize in ourselves, if we're honest. And Emily knew for years. She carried it quietly, without bitterness, without performing it for anyone. And when the moment came, she answered honestly when she could have deflected. That took more courage than anything Nathan did at that fence. They both chose the honest thing. And from that one moment at a creek in Colorado, in the summer of 1882, everything else followed. The greatest things in this life are rarely hidden. They're usually right there close by, doing laundry by a creek, waiting for you to look up from whatever you've been doing and finally see them clearly. Don't wait 7 years.